Welcome back, folks. So let us continue from where we had left off last time. The verse that we were looking at was avyaktoyam achintyoyam avikaryoyam uchyate tasmadevam viditvainam nanushochitumarhasi. So we saw that the core existence, consciousness, or this mysterious energy is forever present. It is not possible to obliterate it in that sense. It is when we interact with the world, we don't see it. We see a tree, but the whole manifestation of this tree is, we know now, is embedded in the form of a blueprint inside the tree. It was there inside the seed when the seed was sowed in the ground, and that is what gave rise to this tree. But it basically is a manifestation of the blueprint, which was certainly present then and is present even now. So when we look at anything around us, it is basically a manifestation of that blueprint, the subtle intelligence that governs the universe, both sentient and insentient. And at that time, it is actually quite impressive that the rishis of those time could put forth such a thought, because several thousand years ago, the technology or the knowledge that we have today of DNA and genetics and how that blueprint is there that gives rise to traits of the final manifestation of things, how we could actually engineer these genes in order for it to produce things the way that one might want. How far it is successful and all that is a different story, or the ethics around that. But the point is that they were able to think that there is this subtle map that is there, that is underlying everything that we interact with, the experiences that we have, the interactions that take place between us as an individual and the external world. Although it is not immediately apparent, the blueprint is there. The avyakt, the hidden, the unmanifested energy is forever present. And so it is not possible for anyone to eliminate that. And therefore, oh Arjuna, you take that into cognizance and do not lament. That is what we saw. And I've been talking about this notion of how the material energy and the sentient part of things, how they are decomposed, especially the with with the current knowledge, armed with the current knowledge of matter that we have. It even emphasizes the point that Vedanta makes more clearly. And one has to understand that once one knows more and more of Vedanta, it starts to become more and more clear that Vedanta is not per se a religion like the typical religions. When the word religion is said, whatever comes to mind is not what Vedanta is. Vedanta is different. It's really a science. It's the science of mind and life. And it will not ask you to believe in such and such a god or such and such a force and go and do things in this way. Even if they do ask you, it will be in a very scientific way. If you want to look at how the atoms get flung out when they, or electrons or photons, when they acquire sufficient energy, then there would have been steps provided. You follow the steps and you will be able to see that. So when you take a filament in a bulb and you heat it enough, you will see that after it attains a certain temperature, which means that enough energy has been provided to the photons, then it begins to glow, which means light is being emitted. So in case of Vedanta too, they would make a statement and then they would lay down the steps that you do these 4 or 5 steps and you will be able to see this, which is why it kind of forms different from they will not ask you to like trust me. Well, the trust is kind of a very at a very basic level. When you are learning calculus in your physics preliminary classes in college, you basically are trusting the professor when he says that, you know, the basic fabric of matter happens to be an atom, which is a nucleus around which electrons are revolving, just like the Earth and other planets revolve around the sun. And if you are to say, I don't believe you, how do you know that? Nobody has seen it. How do you see this? So we have different ways in which we can then work with this thing that we cannot perceive because it is we are not equipped with that kind of equipment to be able to see this. But then intellectually we come up with means to validate this notion that the statement that we are making. And that's exactly how Vedanta says. It doesn't ask you to trust blindly to whatever it says. You can analyze it, look for yourself, and take the steps they said, and you will be able to see it. So I have been talking a lot about this, and maybe it is clear to some of you, but a picture I have this picture that I have. Let me go to the next slide. So, and I want to share this screen over here. So I put this slide together really fast. Maybe I spent less than 10 minutes on this. If possible, it could be made a lot better than what it is. But just to make the points that we have been considering when going over some of the previous verses and the next few verses that we'll be going over. This is an important thing to be aware of. So we have been understanding this, so it's nothing new, but in the picture form. So we, as in the body, we are a living beings. We are a unique case where we are a mix of matter and sentient part, intelligent part, the the conscious part of things, sentient part of things. So what we have, or I've tried to do is I have pulled apart the matter and the spirit or the mind side of things, and then the decomposition that we have been referring to. So we have got matter, and I have put B into brackets here for that stands for the body. And we saw that, or we know that matter can be broken down, and this we have gone over several times, but this is just in a picture form, is made up of molecules, and the molecules are made up of atoms, and the atoms are made up of subatomic particles, and there could be many layers between this, but that's not the point. We are just showing that we do this analysis and we come to the bottommost part of it, which is energy. So there is energy manifested or holding all this structure together. And the previous verse, what it is saying is that it's not that this energy is sitting way in the bottom of the stack. Or I mean, in a sense it is, but it's more than that. It is in and through all this. It is not just there. It is there in every step of manifestation. It is there. It is not just that it is there at the way bottom of things and then something else is there above it. Everything is it only. There's nothing different. There's just a different degree and type of manifestation of that same core strength, same core energy. And then the way it coagulates together, comes together at a certain point in this process, suddenly it comes in the ambit of the the domain in which vision is possible for us, and we begin to see it. It goes one step below and we do not see it. It becomes infrared or it becomes smaller. Really, infrared is not the right thing here, but it becomes smaller than a particular, and it's like glasses. We put on glasses, we see things, and otherwise we don't. So that is easy for us to understand because we experience this every moment in life. Now, the same thing, similar thing, it's not an exact copy of how we can understand the decomposition of matter, but along similar lines, the sentient side of us can also be broken down, and it keeps. This is where Vedanta excels. They have done a magnificent job of doing this deciphering, and they have done it at an excruciating level of details that it's stunning that they have done that much of work. And it is along the same, it is par at the level of belief it asks you to do as science asks you to do. A squared plus b squared is equal to c squared. You might say, I don't believe you. Now you the Pythagoras theorem, but if you want measure, you'll find that is Pythagoras is right. And so also this the Pythagoreans of Hinduism, they have made these equations, these postulates, these theorems. So I have put I have tried to put some kind of stacking, but it's like I said, it's not exactly like this. But there is the subtle side of things. There is mind, intellect, there's ego. It is so wonderful how they have analyzed what ego is. It's mind-boggling, unbelievable that even one can think of ego the way the rishis of then thought about it. And then there is the power to conceive. Perception without conception is blind. So we might see something and it will still be useless unless we conceive it, unless we are going to cognize it. And then sitting at the bedrock of all this is what we have termed as consciousness, or typically the English side of the expert or scholars who try to explain how Vedanta is. They have roughly translated or mapped consciousness to mean Satchidananda is the word that is there in Vedanta. But nevertheless, we get the point. Just like at the extreme right end of this picture, we can understand how matter is composed of this fundamental form. In case of the subtle side of things, you can see that everything, in and through everything, consciousness is present, and it is that which is on which everything is built. And our existence, our life is nothing but a series of experiences, and all those are drawn from the basic substratum. So I put this picture together. I hope it helps you in understanding how Vedanta analyzes the existence, the cosmos that we live in and we are a part of. Okay, so I will stop sharing and I will move to the next verse that is there. अथ चैनं नित्यजातं नित्यं वा मन्यसे मृतं तथापि त्वं महाबाहो नैनं शोचितुमर्हसि अथ चैनं नित्यजातम्. The way these words have come together, atha chaina, cha enam, cha is also, enam is this, atha, if however, atha chainam, that's these words come together to form this compound word. Atha chainam nitya, nitya is, we have seen this word before, is forever. Atha chainam nitya jatam, nityam jatam is always born. Atha chainam nitya jatam. This enam over here means the soul. This, well, so in one sense, if one were to look at this, the theory of reincarnation is something that Hindus or Vedas, they have come up with this notion, but it is not that Vedanta necessarily adheres to that. There are places where it, I won't say challenges, but they come up with arguments and they come up with statements where this becomes irrelevant. And therefore, to stick this theory of reincarnation with Vedanta is somewhat unfair at those points. And I deliberately wanted to highlight this fact because the things of the unknown that are there, it is easy to become subjective about it, become defensive about it, and then ask somebody to believe in it. Like, definitely what happens to man after death is a very open topic. And you can say anything you want and somebody might believe you or not. And you can get into an argument if you are very strong about what you think happens. But there's no need to get into this kind of argument. And the some religions have got their own ideas about what happens to man after death and how all that journey takes place. And in Hinduism, there is this notion of reincarnation where after death, depending on the kind of karmas that have been performed in the past lives, you get another birth. There's a rebirth, a reincarnation. We absolutely do not have to get into this, and there is no need to argue about this because, like I said, Vedanta holds their basic knowledge, their theories, their postulates. This becomes immaterial. So this verse has to be looked at in a slightly different light and not the light of reincarnation. Although someone might be able to interpret it like that, but we will not analyze it in that sense. So atha chainam nityajatam nityam va manyase mritam. So if you think of this soul as being constantly born and constantly dying, nityam, nityam ajatam, jatam is born, and mrityu is a death. Atha chainam nityam ajatam, atha chainam nityam jatam, nityam va manyase mritam. Mritam is death. So if you, Arjuna, even if you think that the soul is born again and dies again, tathapi, even so, even then, still, tatha, tathapi tvam mahabaho. Mahabaho, mighty armed. Maha is strong. And then we'll have to take the context into consideration. Mahabaho is armed. So Mahabaho is strong armed or mighty armed, however you want to interpret it. But basically Arjuna, Tathapi, even if Arjuna, oh Mahabhav, even if you take this point into account that this soul is born and dies again, even then you need not grieve. You should not grieve. So on the face of it, it's bit not contradictory, but conflicting would be a slightly better word to use here. But if you look at, or if you bring to your mind the previous diagram, or let me go back to that diagram. Let me share it again. So this, if you look at this, the way manifestation is occurring here, there is the subtlemost layer, if you will, which is this energy. And then it becomes gross. Gross is, again, this is a typical Vedanta word. And the English meaning of it can be interpreted in two different ways. So I want to avoid using that word. But basically something not that subtle, something more coarse than the finer of the finest. So you take cotton, and then you create a fine thread out of it, barely visible to the eye. And then you go on pulling strands out of it, and then you weave them together to form a cloth. And once it becomes a cloth, then it becomes visible to us. So the subtle form of this cotton is this fine thread. And even before that, of course, it was the cotton. And then it becomes less subtle as thread of cotton, but then it becomes a cloth. And then you take the cloth and then you transform that cloth into a shirt. So it's undergoing this different layers that you're seeing. That's what is happening. So you take the core fundamental raw material. Raw is a kind of unfair word to use here, because this primordial energy is not at all like harsh or rough at the edges, or something. It's not like that. But this form goes on evolving from the subtle to the less subtle to the less subtle. So if you consider the topmost layer in this, when this topmost layer is for whatever reason eliminated. Now if one were to give you a piece of something, a wood, a small piece of wood or a small piece of metal, aluminum, and say, go ahead and destroy it, obliterate it, what could you do? If wood, you take wood and you burn it, and then you say, poof, it's gone. But really, is it gone? When we say this, we know it is not gone. What has happened is it's just gone back to one of these layers out of which it was made. And so these layers, depending on how you look at it, one layer is going back to its previous layer, maybe goes back one more layer, then comes back one more layer, maybe two more layers, and there are innumerable number of layers that one can think of here. So there is this going back and forth, but the core fundamental energy out of which this entire layers are spun, without that, all this going back and forth is just meaningless. It is because of this fundamental energy that this back and forth is happening. You take a piece of paper and then you draw a line on it with a blue felt pen, and then with a red one and with a green one, and you keep drawing, and then after a while you can make out these colors here and there. Wherever there is an overlap of the color, you may not be able to figure out which is the red and which is the green because they have been overlap. But all the while, the paper on which all this is there, it's all happening on this paper. Without that, where will you draw things? The paper is existing in and through all of this. So let me let me go to the next slide that we are talking about and stop this sharing. So अथ चैनं नित्यजातं नित्यं वा मन्यसे मृतं तथापि त्वं महाम. So even if you, Arjuna, consider the death, what is that? It is the going or the journey that is taking place across these different forms. It is really not that complicated. It's just that we are talking about something that is so near and dear to us that we think of it as far more complicated than what it is. So this body, it comes and goes and it comes and goes. It takes on a different form. And because we are making a distinction here of the sentient and the non-sentient things, the non-sentient part of the body where this coming and going taking place, we can easily extend that logic happening to the sentient part of side also. And here, how is that happening in the sentient thing? How in the scientific world, we have been able to come up with all these names that it looks as if they make sense to us because we have been hammered those concepts in our brains right from childhood, and so we think that that is the right thing or that is how things are. The fact of the matter is they are just as ambiguous or as clear as the things on the sentient side of things that we have not studied so far. And if somebody has been studying this sentient side of things, that how is the mind composed of and how is ego composed of, and if somebody has been studying that through his whole life, then that is what he will believe in. Nevertheless, just like this material journey is going back and forth, the spiritual or the matter or the subtle, the sentient side of the journey, that too is going back and forth. And there too, the consciousness which is being manifest through all this, that doesn't change. It continues to stay. The rest of the things keep going back and forth, which is what Krishna is telling Arjuna here. Atha chainam nityajatam nityam va manyase mritam tathapi tvam mahabaho naivam shor. Therefore, do not grieve. Shochati is grieve. Oh Arjuna, therefore do not grieve. We need to remember that this is slightly more complicated because especially if you have been following this from the first sections that I had, it will make more sense. But remember that Krishna is telling this to Arjuna on the battlefield, where Arjuna is concerned, or he has had a mental breakdown when at the thought of having to kill his near and dear ones. And this is, we have seen the surface meaning. If we look at what is happening, this is basically an aspirant who is trying to understand. He's contemplating, he's meditating. When I use the word meditate, I don't want to alienate a whole chunk of section who might think, oh, he's talking of something esoteric. It is not that. It's you just focus on something. It's a very obvious thing that you can think about. And so this when this aspirant, this sadhaka, is focusing on trying to understand this core mystery of life, there are these other things that are coming to his brain, to his mind, and they are pulling him down, and they are not letting him have that clarity that he needs to understand this mystery of life. And this is a metaphor that is representing the struggle of that aspirant who is trying to understand that mysterious force. And it is easy to dismiss this as something maybe not that trivial. Okay, you need a little bit more effort. This is it's there is a danger for one to dismiss it as something trivial or not that trivial, slightly difficult. Is it as difficult as studying for my law exam? Is it as difficult as studying for my GRE, or any of these difficult exams that are there? Is it how difficult is it? 5 times more difficult than that? It's in a league apart. This effort, this attempt of the aspirant, of the sadhaka to understand this is in a league apart. You cannot compare it with these goals that we typically pursue. It's there's a story of a frog is who comes from the ocean. He's living by the side of the ocean, and he somehow happens to come and drop in a well in which there's another frog, and they are talking. And most of you might know this story, but and this frog from the well is like, "Where are you from?" And he says, "I live by this ocean." What is this ocean? This guy has no clue what the ocean is. Well, it's ocean is just like this well. There's water, lots of water. And then this frog is like, how big? It's bigger than this. And so he takes a jump from one side of this well to this other side. Is it this big? Is it 2 times bigger than this? You, it's he has no idea what big is. He has not seen it before. That's the kind of difference that is there over here. Okay, let's move to the next verse. जातस्य हि ध्रुवो मृत्युः ध्रुवं जन्ममृतस्य च तस्मादपरिहार्येऽर्थे न त्वं शोचितुमर्हसि जातस्य हि ध्रुवो मृत्युः. That which has taken birth will die. This is like one of the postulate statements, theorems, laws, however you want to look at it, spiritual laws. And it is not that very, out of the world for one to imagine and understand or appreciate this. Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityuh. That which is born must die. It's a given. And it is not just something that is valid for living beings. It is valid for everything. And this, in that sense, this is a pretty profound statement, pretty profound law. So where all can you apply this? So human beings are born, and so they will die. Okay, because we have been seeing them. We have been seeing people die all the time. And so this is not coming as a big surprise to us. What about the home that we live in, or some tree that we know of? This tree is 300 years old, 400 years old, or something, some big rock or something. What about Earth? anything, the fundamental premise that is being stated here is, if something is comes into being because of the composition of some fundamental things, then the death is certain. That is the statement being made here. So it's a given. If you happen to know something composed of something, that is it. That means it is dead. It's in English there is this phrase called you are a dead man walking. In certain Vedanta text, I have seen some commentators say this, that there are two types of people that live on earth. There are those that are dead and those that are, well, I shouldn't say live, but there are two types of people that are there. Those that are dead and those that are not yet dead. They won't say those that are alive. And that this is the reason behind it. Very fundamental. Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityuhu dhruvam janma mritasya cha. Now this Bhagan is you can see the foresight, how they had analyzed this, the rishis, the statement that they are making. The first part is kind of easy for us to understand. The who is born will die. Okay, I got it. But the next part, who has died will be born again. This calls for a very, hats off to them for having been able to predict this, to understand this. And again, let's not get lost into this notion of a reincarnation. Let's not go there, where somebody is born and rebirth takes place from because of his karma and all that. We don't have to go that far at all. If you understand how today, especially when the theory of the birth of the universe is pretty much proven, it is known that the death of stars is the thing that gives rise to the next generation of stars and planets and solar systems and so on and so forth. So this is a known thing. And you can take a very simple example of, you have water and you freeze it and becomes ice, which is nothing but the death of water and the birth of ice. And now that this birth has taken place, the death is imminent, and then the death of ice is the birth of water. So this death and birth and death and birth, this cycle of death and birth is there everywhere. This is the cosmos. That is, from a Vedantic Maya perspective, that is all that is there that we experience. Okay, this is another big topic that I'm not getting into just now, the topic of Maya. Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityuhu dhruvam janma mritasya cha tasmad apariharyerte is like, this is a given, it is going to happen. So Bhishmacharya was, or any of these people who stand in front of you, they were born and therefore their death is certain. And because their death is certain, their rebirth is also certain. Again, be careful, don't throw the baby along with the bathwater. If you have to take it from a Vedantic sense here. So this aspirant who is basically trying to understand what consciousness is, there are these other thoughts that come in, and he has got a attachment developed. I am using this word attachment. This needs a lot of background, because one cannot take this word lightly. But the attachment that one has to one's loved ones, to the home that he lives in, to his own body, to his existence the way he thinks it exists in this world. Because there are two types of existences really. There is the existence of the body and then the existence of the one inside the body. It's like the car and the driver. So when we look at a car with the driver inside it, we think that both of them are one, but there are really two existences going on there. So this, the aspirant, he has got his idea very strongly baked in his mind of what certain things are, and it is difficult for it's when you are in a dream and you are there's a flood and you are or you are in a desert and you are thirsty, your throat is parched, you're dying of thirst and you're like, I want water, I want water. And somebody who is standing next to you and he's like, here, take it. But the dimension thing that we have been talking about, in the dream, the water has to come there. If it's there in this so-called real world, because when we start discussing these things, the definition of what is real and what is not real starts becoming nebulous. It becomes ambiguous. So this aspirant who is trying to understand the core nature of things, this attachment that he has, the the thoughts that he has, they form a very strong chain with certain objects, not so much with others. And they prevent him from trying to understand. You are focusing on some math problem has been given to you. When you're trying to focus on it, and there is somebody is calling you or something is nagging you, I need to go and get that done. Today is the last day to pay my electricity bill, otherwise I'll get. These things are pulling him down and he's just not able to focus and understand what is there. And so this is the the thoughts, they they come and they cloud what he's really after, and they are the the cessation of those thoughts is going to what give him the clarity that he needs to be able to see what he wants to see. But the irony of it is that he does not want to let go of them. He's too attached, he's too bound to them to the point that he is grieved when he finds that his thought that he has been so much attached to, so much he loves that when it starts to go away, seed, it's giving him grief. In fact, this is kind of an opportunity for him to go and see what he really wanted to see. So this is what is being said over here. This is a metaphor to tell that sadhaka that it is okay. These things will come and go, but you should not be affected by that. This is a catch 22 kind of situation. And we see this quite often, that we say that in order for one to achieve a certain status in the spiritual life, you should be unaffected by good or bad things, by happy and sad things, by pleasure and pain, and so on and so forth. All the different opposites are there. It is one thing to say that, but the fact of the matter is that this is how a person becomes after he attains this final status. So it's a catch-22 situation. It's like a chicken and egg thing. What comes first is what happens. Anyhow, we will see some of it because Sri Krishna goes over this. This Arjuna actually asks this question in the 6th chapter, and Sri Krishna answers that. There's a danger of getting lost in all these intellectual gymnastics. Okay, we are almost at the end of this hour. Let me go to the next verse, just at least to recite in Avyaktaadini bhutani vyaktamadhyani bharata avyakta nidhananyeva tatra ka paridevana. So avyakta, so this is not used in the same sense that we were considering this genetic blueprint that is there. It is not in the same sense. It is in the sense that the ice was in a manifested form in water, and it came into existence and it went out of existence. But really, we know it just doesn't vanish altogether. It just goes back to the elements from which it was constructed. Avyaktadini bhutani. Bhutani is things that were created, this creation. So in the beginning, it was unmanifested. It was not there. Avyaktadini bhutani. Vyakta madhyani bharata. Vyakta is it comes into existence. This is a very profound statement, and the English equivalent, the profound English equivalent of this is the this matter, it borrows existence for the time that it is. And when existence goes away, it also goes away along with that. So it's more profound than what meets the eye over here. Nevertheless, avyaktadini bhutani, so it's not there. This creation is not there before. Vyakta madhyani bharata, it comes into existence for some time. Avyakta nidhananyeva. So that it again after death, it again goes back. It again goes back to its unmanifest state. Avyaktadini bhutani vyaktamadhyani bharata avyakta nidhananyeva tatra ka paridevana. So you therefore you should not. So I think of it as a bell-shaped curve. It's like Gaussian curve. It's a very typical curve in statistics. Something is not there, it comes into it is actually more than that. I guess it depends, but if you look at the ECG, you have got that pulse, it keeps going up like that. That's how really existence is. It is not there, it exists for a moment and then it's gone again. So the ice example is also pretty easy to understand. It's water becomes ice, becomes water, comes into existence, death. So when the word death is used, we need to keep in mind that we need to translate it appropriately to mean change. At every moment we are dying. It is not just like death takes place at the end when everything goes away. The reason that the death that we know of as death is because there is a sentient side to the body, which also happens to, it is also like undergoing change. But at one point, the change is the levels in which this change happens is more distant than what we are used to. And these two, if we look at things, it's a very, very simple thing. If we want to understand when evening took place, and you can set your eyes on the horizon and keep watching. Okay, this is it. At this minute, this is when evening has started or night has started. It doesn't. There's a twilight zone. It's a gradual thing. It just slowly it goes, and before you can know anything, understand, it has already taken place. That is, something like that happens, but we think as if there is this spike and this person no longer exists. The fact of the matter is he is gradually being is gradually being leaned into that mode, going into that dissolution. All the while it had been happening. Okay, we are way over time. Thanks for listening, and I will conclude this session.